From the questionable scene between the leads in The Reckoning to the horrible scene between Blackjack and Jamie that we couldn't even watch, here are the most controversial moments from Outlander, starting with episode 9 of the first season. Now, I agree that this has been too much for viewers at points. If you've watched season 1, you probably have this scene etched in your mind, against your will. The Reckoning had what could easily be the most controversial scene from the Outlander books. For a little context here, since this is season 1, Claire and Jamie have only started to get to know each other, and this detail only makes what's going to follow much worse. Remember how Claire tried to run away to the stones to return to her time when Jamie specifically told her to stay still? Well, she doesn't stay still, but she doesn't get what she wants either. Claire ends up being caught by the vicious Jack Randall, who'll go to any lengths to get his revenge on Jamie. Of course, in true Outlander heroic fashion, Jamie rescues her by planning a great ambush and escape. But that's not relevant here. After Claire and Jamie return to the brothel, the Highlander decides that he has to punish Claire to teach her a lesson. What punishment would that be? Spanking. The incident is very alarming as it is, but more so for a time-traveling World War II combat nurse who's suddenly thrown into a world from 2 centuries ago. This scene has divided fans for many years now, and many book fans even debated whether it was really necessary to include it here. I'll tell you, I don't think it was. The scene added little to the story. If it had caused some major conflict between Jamie and Claire, that led to more complications in the storyline. You could argue that it had some effect, but it doesn't do any of that. Claire's mad at him, but that's about it. I mean, they go back to normal only in the next episode. Now, if this portrayal of this kind of violence wasn't problematic enough, the showrunner's comments on it definitely filled that gap. Ronald Moore took to the press at a premiere screening of the show, explaining his creative approach behind the scenes. He explained that he wanted it to be from Jamie's point of view, to understand how he was feeling and why he was doing this. I'm sorry, but what the heck does that even mean? That's not where it ends, though. Moore went on to say that we're a modern audience, so we know how Claire is feeling. What we don't know is how Jamie feels. Talk about taking space away from the victim, am I right? What set me off the most was Ronald saying that this scene wasn't about violence. For Jamie, it was about justice, and the fans were just not having it. Do you know what's the worst part about the scene, though? A lot of shows show abuse for what it is, a bad thing that happens in our society, and definitely happened much more in the 18th century than it does now. But most other shows don't use the same happy-go lighthearted music on the soundtrack as Outlander did, as if this is just some wholesome lovers' quarrel. Moore said that this soundtrack choice was so he could tell viewers that everything was going to be fine. Yeah, this one didn't sit well with the fans at all. This next scene, though, while consensual, was just as uncomfortable, if not more, to watch for even the characters involved, let alone us viewers. Because, like, who gets intimate during work? I'll tell you who. Fergus and Marsali. Like the previous scene, this one from season 6 was also taken directly from the books, and it was the first one that showed this couple actually being intimate with each other. If you ask me, though, it was probably too intimate, because it happens while Marsali is in labor with Fergus's child. In pain too, by the way. And instead of reassuring his wife, holding her hand and letting her know that everything is going to be okay, as you'd expect any husband to in this situation, Fergus, being the ever-caring guy that he is, decides that this is the right moment to fondle and play with her breasts. While Claire is in the room, by the way, as a midwife. Now, we all know that Claire is far from a prude when it comes to matters like these, but even she is forced to excuse herself from there. Not just that, but the family in the next room is also scrambling for ways to leave so they can avoid hearing Marsalis's moans, including Jamie. And if all of this wasn't bad enough, the scene also includes Fergus's justification for his behaviors, saying that such stimulation actually helps to bring labor along and reduces pain as well. Now, I don't know how scientifically authentic that fact really is, but you'd think that Dr. Claire would know better, right? Like always, fans were left debating whether showing this was really necessary since it added nothing to the story. But these debates were certainly not as divided as those on Outlander's questionable portrayal of the Native Americans. Now, this isn't a specific scene, but a couple of scenes that depicted the Cherokee tribe in later seasons. of the show. I won't go so far as to call the portrayal racist, because it really wasn't stereotypical or anything like that, but I think anyone who's watched those scenes can see that it was far from completely accurate. For one, the Cherokee characters were very one-dimensional, even compared to the books. They were mostly used as backgrounds to fill up the mise-en-scene. The books, in comparison, focused more on how the Cherokee were similar to the Highlanders in many of their practices, and how Jaime found this connection to them because of that. While that can be problematic as it is, not showing them as anything other than a background is just worse. The problem is worse than just not giving them layers, though. The show portrayed perceptions of the Cherokee as more evil or savage, unlike the book, and that is a racially charged choice from the writer's room, if you ask me. You're right. Racism was very rampant in the timeline of the show, and showing it accurately is only necessary, but it's pretty tone-deaf for showrunners to add these things that weren't in the book. They justify some super inappropriate scenes by saying that they were in the books and couldn't be avoided. Yet here they are, modifying the book's story as they please. Make it make sense. And if you really pay some attention to detail here, you'd notice how most Cherokees are wearing too many porcupine hair roaches instead of feathered ones, which is typically what the tribe mostly wore, except for a minority of warriors. So it looks like someone didn't do well on their history check, but credit where credit is due. At least they didn't have white people playing Native American characters. That would have been disastrous. But nothing that'd kill the show, of course. After all, when a show continues after showing such horrifying scenes of sexual violence, nothing can stop it. There are too many to even list here, but let's start with Claire's brutal assault in the Season 5 finale, where Caitriona Balfe's character is subjected to assault by a group of men, only because they feel threatened by her new and innovative healing methods. It's too graphic to even describe here, and naturally stirred up a new wave of debate on social media. Twitter fans were angrier than ever, and news articles were debating whether it was really necessary. Though you'd think they'd grown tired of it all by now, right? I don't know about you lot, but this scene was the last straw for me, though I should have expected it by now. After all, this scene came only one season after Claire's daughter Brianna was assaulted in a pub, and 3 seasons after her husband Randall kidnapped Jaime, tortured him, and assaulted him violently, which is easily the most controversial scene of the show, one that led to many just quitting it altogether. Most fans agree that the scene was just too long and way too graphic. One Twitter user wrote about how, even though they have a pretty strong stomach, this scene disturbs them to this day, and they're right. There's a way that you show the realities of extreme violence, and this scene was just not it. It was dangerously close to torture exhibition at one point, and just think of what that'd do for disturbed viewers. Doesn't the media play a big role in our psyche? Is it responsible for the showrunners to then show a scene like this? Another user wrote how they couldn't handle watching this sort of content ever again. I mean, the amount of sexual violence in that show is disturbing enough. We really didn't need this reminder. Even Sam Heughan, the actor who plays Jaime, has agreed with these viewers, saying that some of the graphic details were absolutely unnecessary. He wrote a memoir in which he describes filming the episode as a harrowing, exhausting experience. I really hope Sam's doing better now. So, from the scene between Blackjack and Jaime that left fans no choice but to stop watching, to that super questionable scene in The Reckoning, these were the most controversial moments from Outlander.